I wasn't supposed to be there. Benefit galas just weren't my thing. They never had been. Champagne flutes and strained conversations, designer dresses and those fake networking smiles. The whole scene felt like some kind of play that I'd never rehearsed for. But Principal Morrison had cornered me the previous week, wearing that particular look on her face. That look that basically screamed, "This isn't a request. Emma," she'd said, "we need someone from the art department. Our biggest donors will be there. Just show your face, talk a little bit about the program, make them feel good about writing those checks." So, there I was, standing in the grand ballroom of some ridiculously fancy Manhattan hotel, where the marble floors probably cost more than I'd make in an entire decade. My black dress was 6 years old, originally bought for a college interview that I'd spectacularly failed. The flats on my feet were purely practical because heels felt like some kind of voluntary torture. All around me, women sparkled with jewelry that could easily pay off my student loans, and the men wore watches that were worth more than small cars. I was just trying my best not to look as uncomfortable as I actually felt. My fingers instinctively went to the necklace at my throat. They always did that when I was nervous. It was just a simple silver chain with a small anchor pendant, worn smooth from 15 years of anxious fidgeting. I'd had it for so long that I barely remembered a time when I wasn't wearing it. Sometimes, I even caught myself reaching for it in the shower, completely forgetting that I'd taken it off. "Ms. Reeves." I turned to see Principal Morrison approaching, accompanied by a silver-haired man in a ridiculously expensive suit. Everything about him just radiated money and power, from his Italian leather shoes to the platinum watch on his wrist. "This is Richard Castellano, board member of the Fontanilli Foundation. They're considering a major grant for our program." I shook his hand and instantly slipped into teacher mode. It was the version of myself that could speak passionately about art therapy and creative expression, even while my mind was silently counting down the minutes until I could finally escape. He started asking questions about our curriculum, our student demographics, and our success stories. I answered honestly because I genuinely believed in the work we were doing, even if I absolutely hated doing it surrounded by this much ostentatious wealth. "You're quite dedicated," he said after several minutes. "The foundation really appreciates educators who genuinely care. I just want these kids to have outlets that I didn't have when I was their age. I had a somewhat difficult childhood." The question felt way too personal for a fundraiser, but his tone was actually kind, so I answered anyway. "Complicated, but art really helped. It still does." "Well, then let me introduce you to our director. He's the one who makes the final decisions on the grants." Castellano gestured across the ballroom. "He's young, but don't let that fool you. Alessandro takes the foundation's work very seriously." We started moving through the crowd, and I tried not to focus on just how completely out of place I felt. Every woman there looked so polished, so confident, like they'd been born knowing exactly which fork to use at those fancy formal dinners. I, on the other hand, had grown up in foster care until the Reeves family finally adopted me when I was 4. Then, when I was 10, we'd suddenly fled to Boston for reasons that my parents never fully explained. Fancy galas definitely hadn't been part of that particular education. Then I saw him. He was standing near the bar, surrounded by men in dark suits who moved with the precision of trained guard dogs. But he wasn't like them. He was maybe my age, 25 at most. He had perfectly styled black hair, a sharp jawline, and shoulders that filled out his tuxedo in a way that hinted at serious time spent in a gym, or maybe even something a lot more violent. Ice blue eyes were focused on his phone, scrolling with one hand while the other held a glass of whiskey. Something about him made my chest tighten. It wasn't just attraction, even though he was objectively attractive. It was something deeper, more unsettling, like my subconscious mind was recognizing something that my conscious mind couldn't quite place. Castellano was still talking. "Alessandro personally oversees all of our educational initiatives. He really believes in giving back to the communities that need it most." Alessandro. The name felt heavy in my mind, significant in a way that I didn't understand. Then he looked up. His eyes found mine across the crowded ballroom, and suddenly the entire world tilted. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't look away. Those eyes. That exact shade of blue. I'd seen them before. I knew I had. But where? When? His gaze dropped from my face, down to my throat, to the necklace. Every muscle in his body went completely rigid. The phone in his hand went dark, and the whiskey glass trembled slightly in his grip. For 3 seconds that felt like hours, he just stared at the anchor pendant resting against my collarbone. Then he moved and not walked, moved, like a predator who'd finally spotted something that belonged to him. He cut through the crowd without even seeming to notice the people who were hastily stepping out of his way. The men in suits followed, but stopped when he raised one hand in a sharp, dismissive gesture. I should have run. Every single instinct I developed from years of surviving the foster care system screamed at me to turn and leave immediately, but my feet just wouldn't cooperate. He stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back just to meet his eyes. Up close, he was even more intimidating. He was taller than I'd realized, at least 6'3", and the scent of expensive cologne mingled with something darker, more dangerous, leather and gunpowder, and barely contained violence. "Where did you get that necklace?" His voice was low, controlled, but underneath, I could hear something sharp and desperate. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Those ice-blue eyes just kept boring into mine, demanding answers that I couldn't give. "I asked you a question." His hand moved, his fingers closing around my wrist. Not painfully, but firmly enough that I couldn't easily pull away. "Where did you get it?" "I bought it." The lie came out automatically, practiced from 15 years of keeping secrets. "At a thrift store years ago." "You're lying." "I'm not." "Your pulse is racing." His thumb pressed slightly against the inside of my wrist, finding the frantic beating of my heart through my thin skin. "You're terrified." "Why?" "Because you're grabbing me at a fundraiser." We just stared at each other. The noise of the gala faded into background static. There was only him, only those ice-blue eyes that I somehow knew from somewhere, only the pressure of his fingers on my wrist, and the terrible certainty that this man could completely destroy me if he wanted to. "Mr. Fontanilli." Castiano's voice broke whatever spell had locked us together. Alessandro's fingers loosened, but didn't immediately release me. When they finally did, my wrist burned where he'd touched me, like his fingerprints had been branded into my skin. "Richard." Alessandro's voice was perfectly controlled now, betraying absolutely nothing. "You were introducing me to someone, Ms. Emma Reeves. She teaches art at PS 118 in Brooklyn." "Brooklyn." The word hit me like a physical blow. Alessandro's eyes sharpened. "Brooklyn," he repeated softly. "How interesting." Why was that interesting? Why did the mere name of a borough make his expression shift from controlled fury to something calculating? "I'll be in touch," Alejandro said, still looking directly at me. "About the grant." Then he turned and walked away, the men in suits falling into formation around him. I just stood there, shaking, my wrist still burning, my heart still hammering against my ribs. Castellano was saying something about funding timelines and application processes. I nodded without hearing a word. My eyes tracked Alessandro across the ballroom. He stopped near the exit, pulled out his phone, and made a call. Even from that distance, I could see the tension in his shoulders. Then he looked back at me one final time. The promise in that look made my blood run cold. This wasn't over. Whatever I'd accidentally triggered by wearing this necklace, by being there, by existing, it was just beginning. I left the gala 20 minutes later, making up some lame excuse to Morrison about not feeling well. I walked 8 blocks before I could finally breathe normally again. I called a car because the subway suddenly felt too exposed, too public. In the back seat, my hand went to the necklace. I should take it off. I should go home and bury it in a drawer and never, ever wear it again. But I just couldn't. It was the only thing I had from that night 15 years ago. The only real proof that the girl with the blue eyes had been real. That she'd pressed this into my 10-year-old hand and whispered desperately for me to hide it, to never tell. And now her brother had found me. I didn't even need to look up his name to know that's who he was. The eyes were identical, the same impossible shade of blue that I'd seen dimming in a warehouse in Red Hook when I was just 10 years old. When I'd watched a girl my age die in a pool of blood, and promised her I'd keep her secret. Alessandro Fontanilli. I kept that promise for 15 years. But something told me those years of silence had just come to an end. 3 days passed without any further contact. 3 days where I jumped every time my phone rang, where I constantly checked over my shoulder, where sleep came in fragmented pieces, filled with those ice blue eyes and that horrifying blood. I kept trying to tell myself I was overreacting, that Alessandro Fontanilli had just been surprised by the necklace but wouldn't actually do anything about it, that I was safe. I was wrong. It started with the feeling of being watched. On my way to school the second morning, I noticed a black sedan parked across from my building. It had tinted windows, the engine was running, and no one was getting in or out. By the time I left for work, it was gone. I tried to convince myself that I was just being paranoid. That afternoon, the same car reappeared half a block from the school. Different location, same vehicle, same distinct sense of being watched, of eyes tracking my every move. On the third day, there were 2 of them. Black sedans at both ends of my street when I left for work. There were men in suits standing near the subway entrance, not looking directly at me, but positioned in a way that felt very intentional. One of them even had an earpiece visible beneath his collar. I wasn't paranoid. I was being surveilled. By the third night, I'd completely stopped sleeping properly. Every single sound in my building made me freeze. Every footstep in the hallway outside my door sent adrenaline spiking through my entire system. I'd lived in this studio apartment for 6 months. Ever since coming back to New York after my parents had died in Boston, it had felt safe. Now it felt like a trap. I got home from school around 6, my arms full of student artwork that desperately needed grading. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and automatically reached for the light switch. Someone was already sitting in my apartment. The scream died in my throat the moment I saw who it was. Alessandro Fontanilli was sitting in my desk chair, perfectly still in the darkness, his hands folded in his lap. He was wearing a dark suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. His ice blue eyes tracked my movements as I stood frozen in the doorway. "Close the door," he said quietly. My hand instinctively found the doorknob behind me. Every single instinct screamed at me to run, to get out, to go anywhere but here. But where would I even run? He'd already found my apartment. He'd somehow managed to get inside. He'd been waiting for me. Running wouldn't help. I closed the door. The click of the lock felt incredibly final. "How did you get in here?" That's not the question you should be asking. Then what is the question I should be asking? You should be asking how long I've known where you live, how much I know about you, and why you're still breathing when you've been lying to me. He stood in one fluid movement, towering over me even from across the small space. Emma Catherine Reeves, 25 years old, born in Brooklyn, adopted by Michael and Jennifer Reeves at age 4. Lived in Brooklyn Heights until August 15, 2010. Then your family relocated to Boston very, very quickly. No job transfer, no family emergency. Just packed up and left within 2 weeks. My blood turned to ice. You investigated me. Of course, I investigated you. You're wearing my dead sister's necklace and lying about where you got it. He took a step closer. But here's what I can't figure out. Why did your family run to Boston on August 15, 2010? That's 2 weeks after my sister was murdered in a warehouse in Red Hook. That's 2 weeks after a 10-year-old girl was executed. And the only witnesses were the killers. I don't know what you're talking about. More lies. Another step closer. Your heart is racing again. You're terrified because you do know. You know exactly what I'm talking about. He pulled his phone from his pocket, unlocked it, and held it up so that I could see the screen. A photograph filled the display. It was a picture of 2 children, maybe 9 years old, laughing at something off camera. A boy and a girl with identical black hair and those piercing blue eyes. The girl was wearing the necklace that I was wearing now. This was my sister, Bianca. We were twins. This was taken about a month before someone shot her 3 times in an abandoned warehouse and just left her to die. His voice was steady, but underneath, I could hear something breaking. She was wearing this necklace when she died. It was a gift from me. I made it myself. I saved for months just to buy the pendant and had it attached to sterling silver. There's no other one like it in the world. I couldn't look away from the photograph. The girl's face was frozen in happiness, laughing at something she couldn't possibly have known would be her last summer. Those blue eyes were so full of life. So, I'll ask you one more time, Emma. Where did you get that necklace? My legs completely gave out. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor, my arms wrapped tightly around my knees. 15 years. I kept this secret locked inside me for 15 years. I had never told anyone, not even the therapist my parents had sent me to after we moved. I had never spoken about that night, about what I'd seen, about the promise that I'd made. But now her brother was standing in my apartment with evidence that I couldn't possibly deny. And the walls that I'd built so carefully around that memory were finally crumbling. I was there, I whispered. Alessandro went completely still. What? I was there that night in the warehouse. I saw everything. The words just kept coming now. 15 years of silence breaking like a dam. I was hiding. I didn't mean to be there. I had run away from home, and I was just trying to find somewhere safe to sleep. I ended up in that warehouse, and then they came. He moved closer slowly, like he was approaching a wounded animal. He crouched down in front of me so that we were at eye level. Tell me everything. So I did. I told him about my adoptive father's drinking, about the fight that night, about running away at 10 years old with absolutely nowhere to go, about finding the abandoned warehouse in Red Hook, about hiding under a tarp-covered table in the upstairs office, about waking up to the sound of cars pulling up outside. I heard footsteps on the metal stairs. I stayed hidden, but I could see through a gap in the tarp. I could see into the main warehouse space through the office window. My voice shook, but I kept going. There was a man, older, with silver hair. He was carrying a little girl. She was crying, asking for her dad. He kept telling her that it was okay, that they'd be with her dad soon, that she was safe. Alessandro's breathing completely changed. Franco Sassolini, my father's advisor. I don't know his name, but he seemed kind. He set her down behind some crates and told her to stay quiet. Then the others came. 3 men. 2 of them were speaking another language. Italian, maybe. The third one had an accent that was different from the others. Hispanic. And he had a tattoo. I closed my eyes, pulling up details that I'd spent years trying to forget. A snake, green and black, going from his collar up his jaw. Very detailed. What happened then? They argued. The older man, Franco, he stood between the girl and the 3 men. He started yelling at them. It got louder, more aggressive. Then I heard phones ringing. One of the men answered and spoke quickly in Italian. He said a name. Luminari. I remember because it sounded pretty, like something from a fairy tale. Alessandro's entire body went rigid. You heard Luminari? You're certain? Yes. He said it twice on the phone. Then everything happened so fast. Tears ran down my face, but I didn't stop. The man with the snake tattoo pulled a gun. Franco tried to shield the girl, but they shot him 3 times. He fell. She screamed and tried to run. They shot her too. Where were you? Still under the table. I was paralyzed. Couldn't move. Couldn't scream. I just watched. They made more phone calls and talked about cleaning up later. Then they left. They got in their cars and drove away. And it was so quiet, except for this wet, rasping sound. My voice broke completely. I knew I should help. I knew I should do something, but I was just a kid, and I was terrified. Took me so long to move. By the time I crawled out and went down to where she was, I thought she was already dead. But then her eyes opened. Alessandro reached out and gripped my shoulder. She was alive when you got to her. Barely. There was so much blood. She looked at me, and for a second, she was scared, like I might hurt her too. Then she understood that I was just another kid. She reached up and took off the necklace with shaking hands. She pressed it into my palm and closed my fingers around it. She could barely talk, but she whispered something. She said, "Hide it. Don't tell. Promise." And you promised. I promised. I didn't know what else to do. Then her eyes just stopped seeing me. She was gone. I looked up at Alessandro, at the tears streaming down his face. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't save her. I'm sorry I kept the secret, but I promised her. And I was so scared they'd come back and kill me, too, if anyone knew that I'd been there. He pulled me into his arms without any warning and just held me while I sobbed against his chest, 15 years of trauma pouring out. When I finally calmed down enough to breathe, he pulled back slightly. You were 10 years old, he said roughly. You witnessed a murder and survived. You kept a dying girl's promise for 15 years. You have nothing to apologize for. But if you had told someone, you'd probably be dead. Whoever killed Bianca would have hunted you down and eliminated the witness. He stood and offered me his hand. Your parents knew, didn't they? That's why they ran to Boston. I let him pull me to my feet. I told them the next day. I didn't want to lie. They saw the news and recognized the location from my description. They were terrified. My dad said if anyone knew I'd witnessed a mafia execution, I'd be killed. We left Brooklyn 2 weeks later. They made me promise to never tell anyone what I'd seen. Until now. Until now. I looked at him. At this dangerous man who'd broken into my apartment and somehow made me feel safer than I had in years. What happens now? His expression hardened. Now I find out who Luminari is, and I make them pay for what they did to my sister. Alessandro didn't leave my apartment that night. Instead, he made a phone call in Italian, speaking rapidly to someone named Luca while I sat on my bed, trying to process the fact that I just confessed to witnessing a murder 15 years ago. When he finished, he turned back to me with an expression that I couldn't quite read. I need you to tell me everything again. Every single detail that you can remember, no matter how small. So I did. We sat on opposite ends of my bed, and I walked him through that night in excruciating detail. The sound of the cars arriving, the way Franco had carried Bianca so carefully, the exact words he'd spoken about her father being somewhere safe, the argument between Franco and the 3 men. Wait, Alessandro interrupted. You said Franco mentioned my father, that they'd be with him soon. What were his exact words? I closed my eyes, reaching back into my memory. He said, your dad is waiting. We'll be there soon. You're safe now. Something like that. He kept reassuring her. Alessandro pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. My father was alive that night. He wasn't killed until 3 weeks later. The official story was that the Russian mafia killed him in retaliation for the conflict they supposedly started by murdering Bianca. But if Franco was taking Bianca to meet our father somewhere safe, then your father knew something was wrong. He was trying to protect her, which means he knew there was an internal threat. Someone close enough to the family that he couldn't trust normal channels. Alessandro's jaw tightened. Tell me more about the 3 men, starting with the 2 who spoke Italian. I tried to visualize them. One was taller, muscular build, dark hair. He was the one who made the phone call, the one who said Luminari. The other was shorter, stockier. They both wore dark clothes. Nothing else distinctive that I can remember. And the third, the one with the tattoo. That one was easier to remember. Tall but not as tall as you. Maybe 6 feet, shaved head, very muscular. The tattoo was incredibly detailed. A snake with its mouth open, fangs showing. It started at his collar and went all the way up the left side of his neck to his jaw, green and black ink. He wore a leather jacket, even though it was summer, and when he spoke, he had a strong accent. Spanish, I think, but I was 10. I couldn't tell you exactly what kind. Alessandro was typing on his phone again. The snake tattoo, that's distinctive. If he's cartel, someone will know him. And if he's cartel. His expression darkened. The family was told the Sansevskaya Bratva killed Bianca, the Russian mafia. We've been at war with them for 15 years because of it. But if the actual killer was Mexican cartel, then someone lied about who did it. Someone orchestrated the whole thing, used Bianca's death to start a war that benefited them. He stood up and began pacing my tiny apartment. Roberto Luminari. You heard that name on the phone. Roberto Luminari has been my underboss for the past 4 years. Before that, he served as regent of the family, managing everything after my father died until I was old enough to take control. The implications were staggering. You think he killed your sister? I think he hired someone to kill my sister, killed Franco, and then killed my father to cover it up. Then he spent 15 years positioning himself as my most trusted advisor while I hunted the wrong enemy. Alessandro's voice was ice. And now you're the only person who can prove it. Fear spiked through me. What does that mean? It means you're in danger. If Roberto finds out you exist, that you witnessed the murder, he'll eliminate you. He's kept this secret buried for 15 years. He won't let one witness destroy everything he's built. But no one knows I was there. I've never told anyone except my parents. And they're dead. I found you in 3 days, Emma. If I could track you down using basic information, Roberto can too. Especially now that he knows I'm interested in you. Alessandro stopped pacing and looked at me. Those men who were following you? That was me who sent them. But now Roberto knows I'm sniffing around, investigating something. He's gonna want to know why. And the second he starts digging into your past, he'll find the same connections I did. A 10-year-old girl, family suddenly fleeing Brooklyn just 2 weeks after the murder. Same time, same neighborhood. My hands just started shaking uncontrollably. So what am I supposed to do? You're coming with me now. Tonight, I'll get you someplace safe where you'll be secure while I continue digging into Roberto, while I find the undeniable proof of what he did. I can't just leave. I got a job here. Responsibilities. You'll be dead within 48 hours if you stay put here. The bluntness of his statement made me flinch. He wasn't just trying to scare me. He was stating an undeniable fact. Something he understood from living for years in a world I'd only ever caught glimpses of from the shadows. I'll handle your job situation, he continued. Family emergency, need for immediate leave. Perfectly understandable under the circumstances. Your principal isn't going to question it. But Emma, I'm not actually giving you a choice here. You're coming with me whether you agree with the arrangement or not because you're essentially the key to everything. The only living witness to my sister's murder. The only person alive who can identify the killers and definitively confirm Roberto's involvement. I should have argued, should have fought tooth and nail for my independence, for my right to be the sole decision-maker in my life. But looking directly into Alessandro's face, at the barely contained fury and resolve etched onto his features, I suddenly understood something extremely important. This wasn't really about me in the grand scheme of things anymore. This was about that 10-year-old little girl who'd bled to death on the cold concrete floor of that warehouse while her older brother frantically searched everywhere for answers. This was about finally getting justice, even if it was delayed for 15 long years. Okay, I said quietly. I'll go with you. Relief flickered across his face, but he quickly masked it. Pack a bag. Enough for about a week. Clothes, toiletries, anything at all that you absolutely can't live without. While I started moving around my small apartment, grabbing the things I thought I'd need, Alessandro made more phone calls. I overheard him barking out orders in clipped, precise tones, arranging for security, setting up new protocols. When I emerged from the bathroom clutching my toothbrush and necessary medications, he was standing silently by the window staring down at the street below. There's a car parked at the end of the block that definitely wasn't there when I arrived, he said without even turning around. Black sedan, engine idling. Could be nothing significant. Could be Roberto's people are already moving into place. My blood instantly ran cold. Already? He's not stupid by any means. He's survived this long by being both extremely paranoid and incredibly proactive. Alejandro finally turned to face me fully. Ready? I cast one last, long look around my apartment. 6 months of trying to build a solid, stable life in the very city where I was born, trying desperately to find some kind of connection to the place my parents had fled from so suddenly and urgently. Now I was leaving again. Running again because of the very same night that had forced us all to run the first time. Ready? I lied. We took the back stairs in near silence. Alejandro moved with an almost practiced ease through my building, clearly having carefully scouted it out before even breaking in earlier that day. At the ground floor, he led me to a door that wasn't the main entrance. He held up his hand to silently stop me, pulled out his cell phone, checked something quickly, and then pushed the door open. A black SUV waited in the alley, windows darkly tinted, engine running smoothly. The driver was a truly massive man with a completely shaved head and an old scar that bisected his left eyebrow. He simply nodded to Alejandro. "Vincent, any problems thus far?" Two men watching the front entrance as ordered. "They haven't moved at all in the last 20 minutes or so. Do you want me to handle them right now?" "No, we simply leave quietly. If they attempt to follow us, lose them immediately. If they try to intercept us directly, eliminate the threat completely." Alejandro opened the back door of the SUV, gesturing for me to get inside. "Emma, this is Vincent. He's been with me and my family for about 8 years now. You're completely safe with him." I hesitantly climbed into the back of the SUV, Alejandro following right behind me. The interior smelled faintly of well-worn leather and gun oil. As Vincent pulled out carefully from the alley and onto the main street, I caught a very quick glimpse of two men in dark suits standing casually near the front of my building, exactly where Alejandro had indicated they would be. One of them spoke directly into a radio as we passed right by them. "They've made us," Vincent said calmly. "Lose them," was the immediate reply. What followed next was easily the most terrifying 10 minutes of my entire life. Vincent drove like he had specifically trained for this type of scenario, weaving aggressively through the confusing Brooklyn streets with a kind of precision that suggested either military or high-level law enforcement training. Twice I spotted cars behind us attempting to follow, and both times Vincent completely outmaneuvered them with quick turns that shouldn't have even been physically possible in those tight spaces. Finally, we merged successfully onto the highway heading swiftly toward Manhattan. "We're clear," Vincent confirmed confidently. No one followed us. Alejandro's hand reached out and found mine in the darkness of the SUV. He squeezed it once, briefly. "You did well back there. Most people would have just completely panicked." "I'm panicking now," I admitted honestly. "I know that, but you're doing it quietly, which is really what matters most." His thumb traced small, comforting circles on the back of my hand. It was a simple gesture that should have been incredibly comforting under the circumstances, but instead it felt charged with an entirely different, much more intense kind of energy. "Emma, I need you to really understand what you're now walking directly into. My world isn't inherently safe by any measure. It's not clean or even close to being simple. The people that I deal with daily, the various things I have to do in order to maintain control, they're really not pretty or pleasant. You're warning me about violence in general? I literally watched your younger sister die a brutal death when I was just 10 years old myself. This is very different, though. This is a conscious choice to actively become a part of it instead of just accidentally witnessing it from the sidelines." "I'm not making a choice to become a part of your dangerous world," I said sharply. "I'm simply choosing not to die. There's a fundamental difference there." He almost smiled faintly. "Fair enough." We drove the remainder of the way to Manhattan in relative silence. The skyline rose before us, a breathtaking panorama of shimmering towers made of glass and steel glittering brightly in the dark night. Vincent deftly navigated us directly to a building in Midtown that clearly screamed of almost limitless wealth. He pulled smoothly into an underground parking garage secured tightly by both heavy gates and heavily armed guards. "Welcome to my home," Alejandro said casually as we both got out of the SUV. "For the foreseeable future, it's your home, too." The private elevator whisked us silently and swiftly directly to his penthouse suite. When the elevator doors opened smoothly, I stepped hesitantly into a space that looked like it belonged in the glossy pages of high-end architectural magazines. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entirety of the city, expensive designer furniture that seemed to be more art than functional seating, carefully planned lighting that seemed to subtly emanate from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It was all both beautiful and deeply intimidating, and utterly alien to someone like me who'd spent the vast majority of her life in very modest apartments and even more modest foster care bedrooms. "The guest room is this way," Alejandro said softly, guiding me down a long hallway. "Private bathroom, everything you should possibly need. If something happens to be missing, just tell me right away and I'll have it delivered to you promptly." The guest room itself was larger than my entire studio apartment back in Brooklyn. King-sized bed with what looked like obscenely expensive sheets, a large work desk, and a walk-in closet that could easily fit 3 times the size of my current wardrobe. Through another discreet door, a spacious bathroom with marble floors, and an enormous shower big enough for at least 4 people. "Get some rest," Alejandro said from the doorway. "We'll talk more in the morning about what happens next in this whole mess." "Alejandro." He turned back to face me. "Thank you sincerely for protecting me, even though I'm really just a complete stranger who simply happens to have some crucial information that you badly need." His usually stern expression softened just slightly. "You're most definitely not just information, Emma. You were actually there with my sister in her very last moments on this earth. You bravely kept her desperate promise for a full 15 long years. That actually means something significant to me. That means absolutely everything." Then he closed the door quietly, and I was completely alone in a room that probably cost more than I would earn in 5 long years of teaching, trying to process the sudden, shocking reality that my entire life had just completely disintegrated because of a simple necklace I'd casually worn every single day without ever thinking twice about it. I probably should have been utterly terrified. And honestly, I was terrified. But simmering underneath the thick layer of fear was something else entirely unexpected. Something that felt almost like a sense of profound relief. For 15 long years, I'd secretly carried this heavy burden all alone, this crushing weight on my shoulders. Now someone else finally knew all of it. Someone who actually understood exactly what it all meant. Someone who could potentially finally get Bianca the justice she had deserved all along. Whatever was going to come next, at least I wasn't going to be carrying it all alone anymore. I woke up to sunlight streaming brightly through the floor-to-ceiling windows, disoriented for a split second, not knowing exactly where I even was. Then all of the memories of the previous day crashed back into my awareness all at once. Alessandro, the luxurious penthouse, running desperately from dangerous men who wanted me brutally dead simply because I'd witnessed a murder 15 long years ago. Quickly checked my phone. 7:30 in the morning. 14 missed calls from Principal Morrison and 3 frantic texts asking where I was and if I was okay. My stomach twisted tightly with fresh guilt. But what exactly could I even say at this point? "Sorry, can't come to work today, currently hiding from the Mafia as we speak." When I finally worked up the nerve to leave the relative safety of the guest room, I found Alejandro in the kitchen area. He'd changed out of last night's expensive suit and into dark wash jeans and a simple gray Henley shirt that somehow emphasized his powerful build. Coffee mug firmly in hand, cell phone pressed tightly to his ear, speaking rapidly in fluent Italian to someone. When he saw me walk into the kitchen, he abruptly ended the call. "Morning," he said by way of greeting. "There's coffee already made, and I had breakfast delivered from down below. Feel free to help yourself to anything you want." The massive kitchen island was completely loaded down with assorted pastries, fresh fruit, bagels, various kinds of cream cheese. Enough food to easily feed at least 6 hungry people. My stomach rumbled despite the sheer anxiety that was currently coursing through my veins. "I really need to call my principal back," I said quietly, pouring myself a much-needed cup of strong coffee. "She's really worried about me." "Already handled," he replied smoothly. "Luca called her this morning, told her that you had a sudden, unexpected family emergency and needed to take immediate leave from work. She formally approved 2 full weeks off for you." "Luca, my second in command," Alejandro explained. "He's been a loyal member of my organization ever since I took formal control of the entire family 4 long years ago." Alessandro intently watched me doctor my coffee with both cream and sugar. "How'd you sleep last night?" "Barely at all, to be completely honest with you." "What about you?" "Same here. I've been working non-stop on trying to positively identify your tattooed friend from that night since at least 4 o'clock this morning." He pulled out a tablet and quickly swiped until he landed on a specific image. "Is this him?" I looked closely at the photograph on the screen. A man with a completely shaved head and a very distinctive neck tattoo exactly as I remembered it from that terrible night. The serpent's fangs were clearly visible even in the grainy surveillance shot. My breath caught sharply in my throat. "That's him. That's absolutely the man who shot both Bianca and Franco." Alejandro's stern expression went instantly cold and strangely satisfied at almost the exact same time. His actual name is Javier Castillo, a freelance sicario who works almost exclusively for the notorious Dinaloa drug cartel based in Tijuana, Mexico. but occasionally travels extensively for very high-value contracts. He's currently wanted in at least 3 different countries for various charges including murder, human trafficking, and weapons violations. How in the world did you find him so fast? I have multiple contacts who specialize in this specific kind of time-sensitive information. Description of a very distinctive tattoo, combined with known cartel connections, and a fairly accurate timeline from back in 2010. It was more than enough for them to go on. He then swiped to another image. This one was a detailed dossier with information in both Spanish and English. According to my own sources, Castillo did multiple jobs in New York City between 2009 and 2011. Then apparently nothing else in this particular region for well over a decade. Because Roberto didn't actually need him anymore after that night, I said quietly. Once both Bianca and your father were dead, the job was effectively done. Exactly correct. Alejandro then carefully set the tablet down on the large kitchen island. But this new information gives us the crucial proof that we desperately needed. A known cartel sicario brutally murdered my sister, not the supposed Russian mafia, which ultimately means that someone had to hire him and then deliberately lied about exactly who was actually responsible. Which ultimately means that Roberto orchestrated absolutely everything from the very beginning. I forced myself to take a bite of a bagel, needing something solid and grounding in my turbulent stomach. What exactly was Franco even doing that particular night? Why was he even taking Bianca somewhere so late? That's precisely what I've been desperately trying to piece together for all these long years. Franco Sassolini was my father's most trusted advisor and personal confidant. They'd literally known each other for almost 30 years at that point. If my father actually sent Bianca away with Franco that night, it was because he'd positively identified a significant internal threat within the family. Alejandro then pulled up yet another document on his ubiquitous tablet. I had Luca pull council records from both July and August of 2010. There was a formal meeting officially scheduled for August 3rd, just 2 days after Bianca tragically died. The actual agenda item was listed as a disciplinary review for completely unauthorized external contracts. So, someone was clearly doing business that they weren't actually supposed to be doing. Exactly. My father was fully planning to bring formal charges against someone extremely high-ranking within the family itself. Someone important enough that it would actually require official council approval for any kind of punishment to be meted out. He then met my eyes directly. Roberto was technically underboss even back then. My father's second in command. So, if your father actually discovered that Roberto had been conducting unauthorized business with those dangerous cartels, dealing unscrupulously behind his back, skimming crucial profits, your father would have essentially stripped him of all of his power and influence and likely even had him brutally killed at a bare minimum. More likely than not, he would have actually been publicly executed as a clear example. Alejandro's voice was completely matter-of-fact, as if we were casually discussing simply firing an underperforming employee instead of discussing brutal, calculated murder. So Roberto simply moved first. Had Castillo brutally kill both Franco and Bianca in order to prevent them from ever reaching safety, then subsequently killed your father merely 3 weeks later before his formal investigation could ever truly advance. All of the various, disparate pieces finally fit perfectly together with horrific clarity. Your father must have known that something was terribly wrong. That's definitely why he sent Bianca away with Franco that night. He was desperately trying to protect her from imminent danger until he could personally deal with Roberto. But someone ended up tipping Roberto off in advance. Someone had to tell him that Franco was moving Bianca to a safer location that very night. Alejandro's jaw actually tightened visibly, which meant that Roberto even had spies working deep inside the family, even back then. People who were somehow inexplicably more loyal to him than they were to my own father. I suddenly thought back to what I had vaguely heard that fateful night, replaying snatches of the garbled conversation in my mind. When Franco was actively arguing with the armed men, he had actually said something very specific. He switched abruptly to very clear English for just one single sentence. He said, "He knows everything. He's already gone directly to the council." Alessandro instantly went completely still. "You're 100% certain those were his exact words?" "I'm absolutely certain of it. It definitely stood out very clearly at the time because everything else they were saying was entirely in Italian. But that one specific sentence, he clearly said it in English. Maybe he did that specifically so Bianca would fully understand what was happening, or maybe he said it simply because he was incredibly stressed and scared at that moment. I closed my eyes tightly, desperately trying to pull up the exact memory from the dark recesses of my own mind. He said it right before they shot him in cold blood, almost like he was desperately trying to tell them all that it was already far too late to stop what was currently in motion. Which essentially means that my father had already directly presented rock-solid evidence to the powerful family council, had already initiated the formal legal proceedings against Roberto himself. Alejandro stood up abruptly and started pacing rapidly back and forth across the large kitchen. That's exactly why Roberto had to brutally kill my father so quickly without any further hesitation whatsoever. The members of the council were already fully aware that there was an official investigation actually underway. If my father had somehow lived even one more week, Roberto would have undoubtedly been exposed and subsequently eliminated without a second thought. But your father died suddenly and unexpectedly, and you were just a small child, far too young to possibly follow up effectively on the investigation. And Roberto quickly became the acting regent, essentially controlling everything for himself while I was forced to simply grow up. He had a full 11 years to carefully bury crucial evidence, to completely consolidate his vast power, to actively ensure that his own carefully crafted version of all of the relevant events became the official, widely accepted truth. By the time I was finally old enough to formally take control of the entire family at the rather young age of 21, the long and brutal Russian war had been raging for well over a decade at that point. There was absolutely no good reason for anyone to question the official narrative. My cell phone suddenly buzzed loudly. A text message from an unknown, unrecognized number. I quickly opened it and my blood instantly turned to ice. The chilling message was incredibly simple and straightforward. One single line. We know that you're currently with him. Come on outside and we'll make it quick and relatively painless. I quickly showed it to Alejandro. His calm expression instantly morphed from barely controlled anger to cold, pure fury in just a single heartbeat. When exactly did this message come through? Just now. I don't immediately recognize the actual phone number. He quickly took my phone, did something to it rapidly, and then promptly handed it back to me. They actively tracked you by using your phone. I absolutely should have immediately thought of that last night. We'll get you a clean, brand new device sometime today. They know that I'm actually here. They know that I'm currently with you. They obviously know that you're actually somewhere with me. This entire building is literally a heavily guarded fortress. They can't actually get to you while you're inside this penthouse. But his tone of voice suggested he was actively trying to convince himself just as much as he was trying to convince me. I need to move much faster here. Roberto's clearly escalating things, which undoubtedly means that he's starting to truly panic. As if he was literally summoned by the very conversation we were having, Alessandro's own cell phone suddenly began to ring loudly. He quickly glanced down at the screen and something unreadable flickered across his usually stoic face. It's Roberto himself. Are you even going to answer it? I almost certainly have to answer it. If I were to actively avoid him at this point, it would basically confirm without a doubt that I'm fully onto him and his entire scheme. Alejandro composed his tense expression into one of practiced neutrality before finally answering the phone call. Roberto, good morning to you. I obviously couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I watched Alessandro's face extremely carefully. His neutral expression remained firmly in place, but his free hand was balled tightly into a fist against the cool countertop. No, I certainly haven't been actively avoiding you at all. I've simply been dealing with some pressing personal matters. Nothing that specifically concerns crucial family business. He paused, listening intently. I really don't think that's particularly necessary right now. Whatever it is that you specifically need to discuss can undoubtedly wait until our regularly scheduled meeting next Thursday. Another noticeably longer pause. No, Roberto. I am absolutely not meeting with you today. I clearly said Thursday, as in next Thursday. He abruptly ended the call and deliberately set the phone firmly down on the kitchen counter. He now wants to meet with me immediately. He claims that there are pressing urgent matters that specifically require my full and immediate attention. He's clearly never really pushed this hard for a formal meeting before because he knows full well that something is definitely wrong. He obviously either knows that you're personally investigating him or he knows all about you. Alejandro's intense eyes met mine directly. Emma, I need to quickly ask you something incredibly important, and I desperately need you to give me nothing less than your complete and honest truth. When you were inside that warehouse, did anyone see you at all? Even for a fleeting second? Is there any conceivable chance that any one of those terrible men somehow knew that there was an actual witness to the brutal crime? I thought carefully back, replaying every last moment of that terrible night. I really don't think so. I was completely hidden underneath the heavy tarp. They never came upstairs to the small office area after they initially left. It was certainly several minutes before I actively moved from my hiding place. By then, they were all obviously gone. But there's definitely a chance, however small, that they perhaps saw some slight movement, heard something vague, or simply noticed that something about the area seemed a bit off. I suppose that there's undoubtedly always at least a small chance of that being true. But I was absolutely terrified at the time. I barely even breathed. 15 long years, Emma. Roberto has somehow managed to keep this terrifying secret safely hidden for a full 15 years. If he even slightly suspects that there was a potential witness, someone who could easily destroy absolutely everything that he's carefully built for himself, he'll quickly eliminate that perceived threat without even the slightest hesitation. Alejandro moved even closer to me now. His mere presence was almost overwhelming in the bright, modern kitchen, which undoubtedly means that you simply cannot leave this heavily guarded penthouse. Not for any actual reason whatsoever. Not until I've personally dealt directly with Roberto and completely neutralized this terrible threat. How long do you think all of that will actually take? Days? Maybe even a week? I definitely need to gather enough rock-solid evidence to convincingly prove beyond any shadow of a doubt to the members of the family council that Roberto deliberately betrayed us. I'm going to desperately need hard documentation, reliable witnesses, even a recorded confession, something concrete that the old members of the family council simply can't easily dismiss as nothing more than a coincidence. He then reached out almost tentatively and gently tucked a loose strand of my hair carefully behind my ear. The seemingly simple gesture felt both incredibly gentle and subtly possessive at the same time. I'm well aware that this probably feels a lot like being trapped inside a gilded cage, but it's essentially a carefully guarded cage that will most definitely keep you fully breathing. And if Roberto should ever try to come here at all, if he tries to force some sort of an unexpected formal meeting, then he's going to have to go directly through at least 12 heavily armed men, including myself. And I promise you, Emma, he will most definitely not actually get to you. I ultimately failed to protect Bianca all those years ago. I absolutely won't fail to protect you now. The sheer intensity in his voice made something deep inside my chest instantly tighten. This actually wasn't really just about merely finding his younger sister's remorseless killer anymore. Somewhere in the past 24 incredibly chaotic hours, I'd somehow become something demonstrably more than a simple witness to him, something much more inherently personal. Outside the large windows, the sprawling city continued to breathe and thrive beneath us. Millions of completely normal people were going about their ordinary lives, going to their boring jobs, mindlessly drinking their morning coffees, completely unaware of the brutal war that was currently brewing silently in the dangerous shadows at least 20 floors above them. A woman was forced to desperately hide from remorseless killers simply because she'd bravely made a heartfelt promise to a dying child at least 15 long years ago. I genuinely need to do something to actually help out, I said resolutely. I simply can't just passively sit here waiting for things to somehow magically happen. If I'm essentially stuck inside this luxurious penthouse, please give me something useful to actively do, something tangible to occupy my restless mind. Alejandro carefully considered this request for a brief moment, then finally nodded his head in agreement. Write down absolutely everything that you can vividly remember from that terrible night. Every single tiny detail, no matter how seemingly small or insignificant. Precise descriptions of the two Italian men, any other random words that you distinctly heard, even the exact timeline as you remember it. Anything at all that might potentially help us positively identify everyone who was actively involved in that brutal crime. You actually think that there were others specifically involved besides Roberto himself? Roberto most definitely didn't act completely alone in this. Someone else secretly helped him out, actively covered for him at every turn, and quite possibly even personally carried out the actual murders under his explicit orders. If we can somehow positively identify every last person involved, then we can quickly dismantle his entire dangerous network once and for all. He then handed me the smooth tablet. Just start writing down everything that you vividly remember. I'll actually have Luca bring you a clean laptop and a new encrypted cell phone later today. As he turned to finally leave, my own hand suddenly reached out and caught his wrist in a surprisingly firm grip. Alessandro, thank you so much for actually believing me. For honestly protecting me so diligently. I know full well that I'm really just some random teacher who unfortunately happened to witness something horrific. You're absolutely not random, he quickly interrupted me. You were actually there when my sister died so tragically. You willingly gave her comfort in her very last moments on this earth. You bravely kept her heartfelt promise for a full 15 long years. That ultimately makes you family in a way that Roberto simply never was. His own large hand then covered mine where it gripped his strong wrist. And I always protect my own family members. Then he was suddenly gone, disappearing quickly into his fully equipped office to make more urgent phone calls entirely in fluent Italian. While I sat alone at his large kitchen counter trying desperately to actively write down very specific memories that I'd previously spent at least 15 long years desperately trying to intentionally forget. 5 long days trapped inside Alejandro's luxurious penthouse. 5 full days of watching the sprawling city silently through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. Feeling helplessly like a beautiful bird trapped inside a very expensive cage. The heavily armed guards routinely rotated their shifts every 8 hours. I'd started to quickly learn their various names, their distinct patterns, the quiet way they constantly moved fluidly through the opulent space almost like incredibly well-trained shadows. Marcus usually during the bright daytime hours, David in the quiet evenings, and Vincent during the long, dark nights. All of them impeccably polite, always heavily armed, and never really quite looking me directly in the eyes. Alessandro frequently disappeared for many long hours at a time, silently handling secretive business that he absolutely wouldn't openly discuss with me. Sometimes I would overhear him conducting heated phone calls in fluent Italian, his low voice sharp with clear command. Other times, he would be working quietly in his large office with the door tightly closed, and I would vaguely see the pale glow of his bright computer screen flickering through the frosted glass. He usually checked up on me periodically, asking simply if I needed literally anything at all, then he would vanish again quickly back into whatever dangerous and violent world that he clearly inhabited on a regular basis. I spent most of my limited time carefully writing down everything that I could possibly remember vividly from that terrible night, filling entire pages with the specific details that I'd personally spent countless hours specifically trying to forget. The chilling sound of Bianca's labored breathing as she was slowly dying. The exact shade of Franco's thinning silver hair. The sickening pattern of dark blood staining the cold concrete floor. Every specific word that I could potentially remember from all of the confusing phone conversations. Alessandro collected those handwritten notes like they were sacred religious texts, silently studying them for countless hours, cross-referencing them carefully with pieces of additional sensitive information that I simply wasn't even privy to. By the 6th long night of what felt like total captivity, I was rapidly going completely insane. The luxurious penthouse was undeniably beautiful, but it was definitely still a carefully guarded prison in many critical ways. I couldn't simply leave whenever I wanted to. I couldn't easily see any of my friends, and I couldn't even simply open a window to get some fresh air because Alessandro was overly paranoid about the potential risk of highly skilled sniper positions. The oppressive walls definitely felt like they were actively closing in around me. I simply couldn't sleep properly at all anymore. There was simply far too much pent-up nervous energy inside me. Far too much constant, overwhelming thinking about Roberto actively hunting me down. And far too much replaying that horrifying warehouse scene in my mind on an endless, continuous loop. Around 2 o'clock in the early morning, I finally just gave up even trying to sleep anymore and quietly went to the spacious living room wearing only pajama pants and a large, oversized t-shirt that Alessandro had kindly given me when I had quickly run out of my own regular clothes. The expansive city glittered almost tauntingly beyond the large windows like countless scattered diamonds. How many people actually out there were sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that a dangerous war was actually brewing in the shadows? How many of them had personally witnessed violent murders and then actively kept that terrifying secret carefully hidden for over 15 long years? Can't you sleep? I spun around sharply. Alessandro stood silently in the open doorway to his office. His necktie noticeably loosened, the sleeves of his dress shirt casually rolled up to his elbows. He looked absolutely exhausted, with dark, telltale circles clearly visible under his intense eyes. His strong jaw shadowed with dark stubble. He'd clearly been pushing himself extremely hard, just as hard as he'd been pushing the crucial investigation. I certainly didn't actively mean to disturb you. You actually didn't disturb me at all. He then moved over to the well-stocked bar and poured generous amounts of expensive whiskey into 2 separate glasses, then silently brought one directly over to me. You genuinely look like you actually need this soothing drink even more than I currently do. I accepted it wordlessly. Even though drinking alcohol at 2 o'clock in the morning definitely felt like a terrible long-term idea. The familiar burn was actually comforting now after at least 5 long nights of this seemingly endless routine. Funny how incredibly quickly extremely bad habits can potentially form when someone is held in comfortable captivity. How long will this entire thing actually go on for? I asked him finally. How long will it be before Roberto finally makes his much-anticipated move, or you finally make yours? Soon, he replied quietly. We're actually very close to finally having everything that we critically need to finally bring him down. He then sat down carefully on the large couch, gesturing silently for me to join him there. I cautiously did so, actively keeping some physical distance between us, hyper-aware of how incredibly thin my borrowed pajamas actually were. Luca actually found definitive records of various very large wire transfers from Roberto's various personal bank accounts to several highly suspicious shell companies in Mexico. The specific timing seems to actually match up almost perfectly with when Castillo was known to be in New York City. It's certainly not completely conclusive proof as of yet, but it's definitely very strong circumstantial evidence at the very least. Is that potentially enough in the long run? Definitely not yet. I genuinely need something much more concrete to actually work with. A reliable witness, definitive documentation, even a recorded confession. Something undeniably solid that the members of the influential family council simply can't readily dismiss as nothing more than a random coincidence. He then took a long drink of his smooth whiskey. The basic problem is that Roberto has actually been actively covering his own increasingly obvious tracks for over 15 long years. He's extremely good at this dangerous game. So, what exactly happens if you ultimately can't actually prove it beyond any shadow of a doubt? Do I simply just hide out here essentially forever? No, of course not. If I ultimately can't actually prove it through the various pieces of hard evidence, I will certainly handle things in an entirely different way. His whole stern expression suddenly went extremely cold and completely hard. But that specific method is definitely much messier and dirtier. It also raises far too many questions that could potentially create even more dangerous instability within the family itself. I would certainly prefer to do all of this cleanly and discreetly through legitimate legal channels. I personally knew exactly what he tacitly meant by actively handling it in another completely different way. Cold-blooded murder, plain and very simple. And the casually clinical way he openly discussed it reminded me sharply that no matter how genuinely gentle he'd recently been with me personally, Alejandro Fontanilli was undoubtedly still a dangerous mafia boss first and foremost. Violence was really his only true native language. Tell me about Bianca, I said instead, abruptly changing the tense subject. What was she actually like before that terrible night changed everything for both of you? He was quiet and contemplative for so long that I genuinely thought he probably wasn't even going to actually answer my probing question. Then, finally, he quietly said she was everything that I specifically wasn't. Soft and compassionate where I was increasingly hard and jaded, kind and empathetic where I was becoming cold and deeply cynical. We happened to be identical twins, but we really couldn't have been any more inherently different from one another. His strong fingers then traced the smooth rim of his expensive glass. She actually cried. She'd sneak them into her room, hide them until our mother inevitably found out, even though my father forbade it. Your father was strict. He ran a criminal organization. Strict doesn't even begin to cover it. But with Bianca, he was different, softer. She was the only person who could make him genuinely laugh. Alessandro set his glass down, walked over to a bookshelf, pulled down a silver-framed photograph and brought it back to me. The image showed two children around 9 years old. A boy and girl with identical black hair and blue eyes, arms around each other, laughing at something just out of frame. The girl was wearing the necklace I'd worn to the gala. Joy radiated from both of their faces. That was taken at our birthday party a month before she died. She'd just beaten me at chess for the first time. Wouldn't stop gloating about it for weeks. His voice roughened. I was supposed to protect her. We had this thing, this twin connection everyone talks about. I could always tell when she was upset or scared. But that night I didn't feel anything. Didn't know she was in danger until it was too late. You were 10 years old. You couldn't have known. I should have felt something was wrong. He took the photo back and stared at it. After she died, that connection just went silent. Like part of me died with her. I spent years trying to feel it again, trying to find some sense of her still existing somewhere. But there was nothing. Just absence. I moved closer without thinking, driven by an impulse I didn't fully understand. She made me promise to survive. Those were practically her last words. To hide the necklace. To never tell. And to survive. I think she knew she was dying, and she wanted someone to live, even if she couldn't. Alessandro's eyes met mine. You kept that promise for 15 years. You survived. You built a life, became a teacher, helped other kids. That's what she would have wanted. Is it enough, though? I survived, but I never got her justice. I never told anyone what really happened. You're telling me now. That's what matters. His hand came up and cupped my face. The touch was gentle but electric. Emma, I need you to understand something. You're not just a witness to me. You're not just a piece of evidence in my investigation. Then what am I? You're the last person who saw my sister alive. The last person who heard her voice, who felt her touch. You're a connection to her I thought I'd lost forever. His thumb traced my cheekbone. And you're someone who's been carrying this trauma alone for 15 years because you were brave enough to keep a dying girl's promise. The air between us felt charged. I should have moved back, maintained distance, and remembered that this man was dangerous no matter how gently he touched me. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned into his palm, felt the warmth of his skin against mine. Alessandro. His phone rang, shattering the moment. He pulled back and answered it with clipped efficiency. I only caught fragments. Luca's name, something about council archives. Then Alessandro's expression changed completely, shifting from controlled warmth to predatory focus. You found it? You're certain? Pause. No, don't send it digitally. Bring the physical documents here. Now. He ended the call and looked at me with something like triumph. Luca found what my father presented to the family council in July 2010. Formal accusations against Roberto with documented evidence of unauthorized cartel dealings, skimming operations, and betrayal of family interests. That's what you needed. Proof. It's what I need to show the council that my father had already proven Roberto was a traitor 15 years ago. Combined with your testimony about hearing Roberto's name at the murder scene, about the cartel sicario, about Franco's words, it's enough. His hands gripped my shoulders. Emma, this is almost over. Once I present this to the council, Roberto's finished. But he won't go quietly. He'll fight back. Let him. I'm ready. Alessandro's expression went cold in a way that reminded me exactly who and what he was. He killed my sister. He killed Franco. He killed my father. He's terrorized you and tried to have you murdered. I'm going to end him, and I'm going to do it in a way that destroys everything he's built. Before I could respond, before I could process the violence in his voice, his office intercom buzzed. A voice I recognized as Vincent came through, tense and urgent. Boss, we've got a situation. Roberto just arrived in the lobby with 6 men. He's demanding to see you. Says it's a family emergency. Can't wait. Alejandro's jaw tightened. How did he get past building security? He's got authorization codes. Old ones from when he used to visit regularly. Security let him through before we could intervene. Lock down the floor. No one comes up without my explicit order. I don't care if he's got codes. I don't care if he claims it's an emergency. He doesn't get access to this penthouse. Understood? Understood, but boss, he's making threats. Says if you don't meet with him, he'll take it as a declaration of war. Alejandro looked at me. Something dangerous and protective flashing in his eyes. Go to your room. Lock the door. If you hear gunfire, get in the bathroom and stay low. Understand? You're going to meet with him here? Now? I don't have a choice. If I refuse, it confirms everything he suspects. I have to face him. Have to maintain the pretense that nothing's wrong until Luca arrives with those documents. His hands framed my face. Emma, I swear to you he won't get near you. I'll kill him myself before I let him hurt you. I'm not worried about me. I'm worried about you walking into an ambush. This is my world. This is what I do. He pressed a kiss to my forehead, quick and fierce. Now go lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you it's safe. I wanted to argue, wanted to tell him this was insane. That meeting with Roberto while tensions were this high was suicide. But the look in his eyes stopped me. This wasn't just about strategy or safety. This was about facing the man who destroyed his family. This was personal. So I went to my room like he ordered. Locked the door. Stood with my ear pressed against the wood. Listening to the sounds of the penthouse, footsteps, voices too muted to make out words, the elevator chiming, and waited for the gunfire I was certain would come. I couldn't stay in the room like Alessandro ordered. Call it stupidity or survival instinct, but I needed to know what was happening. If gunfire started, if something went wrong, I wasn't going to die trapped in a bedroom without knowing why. I crept to the door, unlocked it as quietly as possible, and eased it open just enough to slip through. The hallway leading from the guest wing to the main living area was dimly lit. I could hear voices now, clearer. Alejandro's controlled baritone and another voice, older, smoother. You've been avoiding me, Alessandro. That's not like you. I've been busy, Roberto, handling personal matters. Personal matters that involve hiding school teachers in your penthouse? That kind of personal? My blood turned cold. He knew. Of course he knew. I moved closer, keeping to the shadows until I could see into the living room. Roberto Luminari stood near the windows, hands clasped behind his back like a professor delivering a lecture. He looked nothing like I'd imagined. Silver hair, perfectly styled, expensive suit, wire-rimmed glasses that gave him an intellectual air. He could have been anyone's grandfather, not a man who'd murdered children. 6 men stood behind him in a loose semicircle. All of them had the look of professionals, hands near concealed weapons, eyes constantly scanning. Alejandro's guards were positioned strategically around the room, at least 8 that I could see, probably more hidden. The tension was explosive. I don't know what you're talking about, Alessandro said evenly. Don't insult my intelligence. You disappeared a woman from her apartment 6 days ago. Emma Reeves, 25, substitute teacher, the same woman you showed unusual interest in at that fundraiser. Roberto turned from the window, his smile never reaching his eyes. Want to tell me why you're so fascinated with a nobody school teacher? That's my business. Everything you do is family business. You're not just Alessandro Fontanilli anymore. You're the boss. Your actions affect all of us. Roberto moved closer, unthreatening but deliberate. So I'll ask again. Why are you hiding her? What does she have that's worth risking political stability? Nothing that concerns you, but it does concern me because I've done research on Ms. Reeves. Very interesting background. Born in Brooklyn, adopted young, lived in Brooklyn Heights until August 2010. Then her family fled to Boston within 2 weeks. No job transfer, no explanation, just ran. August 2010. That was the same month sweet little Bianca died. Same neighborhood, too. What a remarkable coincidence. Alejandro's expression didn't change, but his hand moved slightly toward his weapon. The guards all tensed simultaneously. Careful with accusations, Roberto. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm simply observing interesting patterns. Roberto spread his hands in a gesture of reasonableness. A 10-year-old girl witnesses a traumatic event. Her family runs away to protect her. 15 years later, she shows up wearing a very distinctive necklace, and suddenly you're investigating things that were settled long ago. Makes a man wonder what she saw that night. You're reaching. Am I? Because from where I stand, it looks like you've found a witness, someone who can contradict the accepted version of events from 15 years ago, someone who might have information that could be dangerous to certain people. Roberto's mask of civility cracked slightly. Where is she, Alessandro? Somewhere you'll never find her. Is she listening right now? Hiding in one of your guest rooms? Roberto raised his voice. Emma, sweetheart, if you can hear me, you should know Alejandro can't protect you forever. Eventually, you'll have to leave this penthouse, and when you do, my people will be waiting. I pressed my back against the wall, fighting the urge to run. He was baiting me, trying to draw me out or scare me into making mistakes. She's not your concern, Alessandro said coldly. She's absolutely my concern. She's a threat to family stability, to our understanding of past events, to certain arrangements that have been in place for 15 years. Roberto's voice hardened. I know what she is, Alejandro. I know what she saw, and I know you're using her testimony to build a case against me. Then you know I have proof you're a traitor. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Roberto's pleasant facade shattered completely. Traitor? I'm the one who held this family together after your father's death. I'm the one who raised you, who taught you everything you know about leadership. I earned my position through years of loyal service. You murdered my sister. You murdered Franco. You murdered my father. Alejandro's voice was ice. You hired a cartel sicario named Javier Castillo to kill them, then blamed the Russians to start a war that kept everyone distracted while you consolidated power. You've been lying to my face for 15 years. Roberto laughed. Actually laughed. You're basing this fantasy on the word of some teacher who claimed she witnessed something 15 years ago when she was a traumatized child. Alessandro? I expected better. I have more than her testimony. I have financial records showing wire transfers to Mexican shell companies. I have documentation of your unauthorized dealings with the cartel Dinoa. I have the formal accusations my father presented to the family council days before his death. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Roberto's eyes. That's impossible. Luca found them in the council archives. Everything my father compiled proving you were a traitor. He was going to bring charges, strip you of rank, probably have you executed. So you moved first. Killed Bianca and Franco to prevent them from escaping. Killed my father to stop the investigation, then spent 15 years rewriting history. Even if that were true, you can't prove it. Your witness is a traumatized woman with childhood memories. Hardly credible. And whatever documents you think you have can be explained as misunderstandings, accounting errors. The council will decide that, not you. Alejandro pulled his phone from his pocket. Luca, come up. Bring the documents. Roberto's expression went cold and calculating. His hand moved slightly, a signal to his men. They all shifted, hands going to weapons, preparing for violence. I could kill you right now, Roberto said conversationally. Tell the family you'd gone mad with paranoia, that you attacked me first, forced my hand. Half the council would believe it. You've been erratic lately, distracted. It would make sense. You'd never leave this building alive. My men outnumber yours 3-1 just on this floor, but I'd still be rid of you. That might be worth the cost. They stared at each other, two predators weighing violence against survival. I realized with horrible clarity that I was about to witness a massacre. The air felt dense with inevitability. Then the elevator chimed. Luca stepped out, carrying a leather portfolio. He looked pale but determined. Boss, I have everything. Roberto's eyes tracked to the portfolio with barely concealed hatred. Let me see what Antonio supposedly compiled against me. Luca opened it and pulled out yellow documents. Even from my hiding spot, I could see the handwritten notes, the signatures, council records from July 28, 2010. Antonio Fontanilli presented formal charges against Roberto Luminari. Unauthorized business with foreign cartels, skimming family profits, conducting operations without council approval. 3 council members witnessed and signed. Antonio planned to bring it to vote on August 3, 2 days after Bianca died. Alejandro said softly, "Funny timing." Roberto's face was stone. "This proves nothing. It proves my father knew you were a traitor. Proves he was moving against you. It proves you had motive to kill him and anyone who might support his accusations." Alejandro took the documents from Luca, combined with Emma's testimony about hearing your name at the murder scene, about the cartel sicario, about Franco's words. "It's enough. The council will vote to strip your rank and authorize execution. The council won't believe the word of some frightened teacher over 15 years of loyal service. They'll believe her when she describes Javier Castillo in perfect detail, when she tells them about the snake tattoo, about the Spanish accent, about you being named specifically by the killers. They'll believe her when they cross-reference her testimony with these documents and realize everything lines up perfectly." Roberto's pleasant mask vanished entirely, replaced by cold fury. "You self-righteous little bastard. You think you're better than me? I built this empire while you were playing with toys. I made the hard decisions your father was too weak to make. I gave you a throne to inherit. You murdered my 10-year-old sister. There's no justification for that. She was collateral damage. Franco was taking her away before I could explain myself to your father. I needed time to negotiate to make him understand my methods, but Franco panicked, and the situation escalated." Roberto's voice turned bitter. "Your father was obsolete, too soft, too bound by outdated traditions. The family needed strength. I provided it." The confession hung in the air. I covered my mouth to keep from gasping. Alejandro moved with sudden violence. His fist connected with Roberto's jaw, sending the older man staggering. Roberto's guards reached for weapons but found themselves staring down 24 red laser sights from Alessandro's men positioned throughout the penthouse. "Lower your weapons," Alessandro commanded, "or you all die where you stand." Slowly, reluctantly, Roberto's men complied. Alejandro hauled Roberto up by his collar and slammed him against the window hard enough I heard it crack. "You killed my sister. You killed Franco, who was loyal to my father for 30 years. You killed my father and made me call you mentor for 15 years, while you lied to my face about everything." Alejandro's voice was deadly quiet. "You destroyed my family, and for what? Power, money, pride?" Roberto spat blood. "For survival, for the future of this organization. Your father would have run us into the ground with his sentimentality. He would have led with honor, something you know nothing about." Alejandro pulled his gun and pressed it against Roberto's temple. The older man's eyes widened with genuine fear for the first time. "Wait, Alejandro. Wait, we can negotiate this. I have information, resources, connections that could benefit you. I don't negotiate with child killers. That witness of yours, she's still vulnerable. My people know about her. Even if you kill me, they'll finish the job. She'll never be safe." Alejandro hit him again, then again. Roberto crumpled to the floor, face bleeding, glasses shattered. "Her name was Bianca. My sister, your victim. Say her name. Alejandro, please. Say it." "Bianca," Roberto sobbed. "Her name was Bianca, and I had her killed because she was in the wrong place. And Franco and your father, I did it all to protect what I'd built. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry isn't enough." The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Roberto's body jerked once, then went still. Blood spread across the white marble floor like dark wine pooling around his head. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I just watched Alejandro execute a man in cold blood. Watched him pull the trigger without hesitation, without remorse. The man who'd been gentle with me, who'd kissed my forehead an hour ago, had just become a killer right before my eyes. Alejandro stood over the body for a long moment. Then he turned and looked directly at my hiding spot in the shadows. Our eyes met across the distance. "Emma." I ran back to the guest room, slamming the door, locking it, even though I knew it wouldn't keep him out if he wanted in. Collapsed on the bed, hands over my ears like I could unhear that gunshot. Unsee the blood spreading across expensive marble. Footsteps approached. A soft knock. Emma, let me in. Go away, please. You killed him. You just shot him in the head in your living room. He deserved it. That's not justice. That's execution. In my world, they're the same thing. His voice was steady through the door. No hint of regret. He murdered 3 people. He destroyed my family. He tried to have you killed. What did you expect? That I'd hand him over to the police? I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to block out the image of Roberto's body on the floor. I knew what you were. I knew you were dangerous, but seeing it, watching you pull that trigger, it's different. It makes it real. Silence. Then quietly, I know, and I'm sorry you had to see it, but Roberto needed to die, and he needed to know exactly why before the end. I couldn't argue with that, but I also couldn't reconcile the man who'd held me gently hours ago with the one who'd just committed murder without flinching. I didn't see Alejandro for 3 days after Roberto's death. He was handling what he called cleanup, which I tried not to think about too carefully. The body was gone when I finally emerged from the guest room the next morning. The marble floor was spotless, with no evidence that a man had died there, like it had never happened, but I knew better. The image was burned into my memory alongside Bianca bleeding out 15 years ago. Some things you couldn't unsee. The guards were different now, more of them rotating more frequently, all on high alert. Vincent explained when I asked that Roberto's death had created instability. His loyalists were still out there, some of them high-ranking. The family council was meeting to review evidence to decide if Alejandro had been justified. Until they voted, we were in a holding pattern. On the 4th morning, Alejandro finally appeared. He looked exhausted, older than his 25 years. Shadows under his eyes, jaw tight with stress, shoulders carrying a weight I couldn't begin to imagine. "Can we talk?" he asked from the kitchen doorway. I'd been making coffee, trying to maintain some semblance of routine while trapped in his penthouse. "I suppose we have to eventually." He poured himself a cup and leaned against the counter. "I know seeing Roberto die was traumatic. I know it confirmed every fear you have about what I am, what I'm capable of, but I need you to understand something." He wasn't going to stop. If I'd let him walk out of here, he would have escalated, would have come after you, after anyone who could expose him. I understand the logic. I'm not stupid. I cradled my mug, staring into the dark liquid. But understanding why you did it doesn't make it easier to accept. One moment you're gentle with me, making me feel safe. The next you're executing someone. How do I reconcile those 2 versions of you? You don't. They're both real. Both part of who I am. He moved closer, not quite touching, but close enough I could feel his warmth. "Emma, I'm not asking you to forgive what I did or accept my world as normal. I'm asking you to understand that violence is sometimes the only language power understands. Roberto murdered 3 people and would have murdered more. Justice in my world isn't courtrooms and lawyers. It's direct and immediate. And now that he's dead, what happens now? The family council reviews everything. My father's documents, your testimony, financial records linking Roberto to Castillo, his confession before he died." Alejandro set his mug down. "They'll vote on whether his execution was justified. If they rule in my favor, his assets are forfeit, and his loyalists fall into line. If they rule against me, I face consequences." "What kind of consequences?" "Best case, censure and loss of some authority. Worst case, forced resignation and exile." His expression was unreadable. "Possibly death if they decide I've become unstable." My chest tightened. "Would they really kill you?" "The family doesn't tolerate leaders who make unauthorized executions. Even if Roberto was guilty, I moved without council approval. That's a violation of protocol." He finally looked at me directly. "But I'd do it again. He deserved to die for what he did to Bianca. And what about me? Once the council votes, am I free to go?" Something flickered in his eyes. "You want to leave?" "I want to stop being a prisoner. I want to go back to my life, my apartment, my job. I want to pretend the last week and a half never happened." The words came out harder than intended. You saved my life. I'm grateful, but I can't live in this world. I can't be the person who watches executions and acts like it's normal. I never asked you to. You didn't have to. Just by being here, by knowing what I know, I'm complicit. I'm part of it now, whether I want to be or not. Alessandra was quiet for a long moment. Then quietly, "You're right. You didn't choose this. Bianca made you promise to survive, and you kept that promise, but keeping it brought you into my world, made you a target. That's not fair to. Even though my father was strictly against it, she'd still sneak stray animals into the house. She'd hide them in her room until our mother inevitably found out about it. Your father was strict, huh? He ran a damn criminal organization. Strict doesn't even scratch the surface. But with Bianca, he was different. Softer. She was the only one who could get him to genuinely laugh, you know?" Alessandro set his glass down, strolled over to a bookshelf, and took down a silver-framed photograph. He brought it back to me. The picture showed two kids, maybe around 9 or so. A boy and a girl with the same jet-black hair and piercing blue eyes. Their arms wrapped around each other, laughing at something out of the shot. The girl was wearing the necklace I had on at the gala. You could practically feel the joy radiating off their faces. That was taken at our birthday party, about a month before she passed. She'd just beaten me at chess for the first time, and she wouldn't stop rubbing it in for weeks. His voice turned rough around the edges. I was supposed to protect her, you know? We had this thing, this twin connection that everyone talks about. I could always tell when she was upset or scared. But that night, I didn't feel a damn thing. I didn't realize she was in danger until it was way too late. You were only 10 years old. There's no way you could have known. I should have felt something was off. He took the photo back, his eyes glued to it. After she died, that connection just went dead silent. Like a part of me died right along with her. I spent years trying to get that feeling back, trying to find some kind of sign that she was still out there somewhere. But there was nothing. Just this huge, empty void. Without even thinking, I took a step closer to him, pulled in by some kind of impulse I didn't fully get. She made me promise to survive. Those were practically her last words. To hide the necklace, to never tell a soul, and to survive no matter what. I think she knew she was about to die, and she just wanted someone to live, even if she couldn't. Alessandro's eyes locked with mine. You kept that promise for 15 years. You made it. You built a life, became a teacher, helping other kids out. That's exactly what she would have wanted. But is it enough, you know? I survived, but I never got her any justice. I never told anyone the damn truth about what happened. You're telling me now, Emma, and that's what counts. He reached out and gently cupped my face in his hand. That touch was electric, Emma. I need you to get something. You're not just some witness to me. You're not just some piece of evidence in my investigation. Then what am I, Alessandro? You're the last person who saw my sister alive. The last one to hear her voice, to feel her touch. You're the only connection I have to her that I thought I'd lost forever. His thumb traced along my cheekbone. And you're also someone who's been carrying this weight, this trauma all alone for 15 years. All because you were brave enough to keep a promise to a dying girl. The air between us got thick, almost crackling. I knew I should have backed away, kept my distance, and remembered that this man was dangerous, no matter how soft his touch felt. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned into his palm, just soaking in the warmth of his skin against mine. Alessandro. His phone rang, and the moment shattered. He pulled away, answering it with this clipped, professional tone. All I caught were bits and pieces. Luca's name, something about the council archives. Then, just like that, Alessandro's whole expression changed. The warmth disappeared, replaced by this intense, predatory focus. You found it? You're 100% sure? He paused, listening. No, don't send it digitally. I need the physical documents here, pronto. He hung up the phone and looked at me, almost triumphant. Luca found what my father presented to the family council back in July of 2010. Formal accusations against Roberto, with hard evidence of unauthorized dealings with the cartels, skimming operations, and betraying the family's interests. That's it. That's the proof you needed. That's the proof I need to show the council that my father had already nailed Roberto as a traitor 15 years ago. And when you throw in your testimony about hearing Roberto's name at the murder scene, the Sicario cartel, Franco's words, it's all there. He gripped my shoulders. Emma, it's almost over. Once I lay this out for the council, Roberto's done for. But he's not going down without a fight. You can bet on that. Then let him try. I'm ready. Alejandro's face turned cold, and it hit me all over again who he really was, what he was capable of. He killed my sister. He killed Franco. He killed my father. He's terrorized you, Emma, and even tried to have you killed. I'm going to end him for good, and I'm going to do it in a way that destroys everything he's built. Before I could even say a word, before I could even wrap my head around the violence in his voice, the office intercom buzzed to life. It was Vincent, and he sounded tense, urgent. Boss, we got a problem. Roberto just showed up in the lobby with 6 of his guys. He's demanding to see you. Says it's a family emergency. Can't wait. Alejandro's jaw tightened into a hard line. How the hell did he get past building security? He's got authorization codes. Old ones from back when he used to visit all the time. Security just waved him through before we could even stop him. Lock down the entire floor. No one comes up here without my say-so. I don't care if he's got codes. I don't care if he claims it's an emergency. He's not getting anywhere near this penthouse. Understood? Understood, boss, but he's making threats. He's saying that if you don't meet with him, he's taking it as a declaration of war. Alejandro turned his gaze to me, and I saw something dangerous and protective flash in his eyes. Go to your room. Lock the damn door. If you hear any gunshots, get in the bathroom and stay down. Do you understand me, Emma? You're really going to meet with him right here? Right now? I don't have a choice. If I refuse, it'll just confirm everything he already suspects. I have to face him. I have to keep up the charade that everything's fine until Luca gets here with those documents. He framed my face with his hands. Emma, I swear to you, he won't lay a hand on you. I'll kill him with my bare hands before I let him hurt you. I promise. I'm not worried about me. Damn it, I'm worried about you walking right into an ambush. This is my world. Emma, this is what I do. He leaned down and pressed a quick, fierce kiss on my forehead. Now go lock the door and don't come out until I tell you it's okay. Every cell in my body wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him that this was total insanity. That meeting with Roberto with tensions this high was practically suicide. But the look in his eyes stopped me dead in my tracks. This wasn't just about strategy or playing it safe. This was about facing the man who had destroyed his family, piece by piece. This was deeply personal. So I did what he ordered and went to my room. I locked the door, stood there with my ear pressed against the cold wood, just listening to the sounds of the penthouse. Footsteps, voices muffled so I couldn't make out the words, the elevator chiming. I was waiting for the gunfire I just knew was coming. I couldn't stay in that room like Alessandro wanted. Call it stupid, call it a survival instinct, but I needed to know what was happening. If the shooting started, if something went wrong, I wasn't going to sit around and die trapped in a bedroom without knowing why. I crept over to the door and unlocked it as quietly as I possibly could. I eased it open just enough to squeeze through. The hallway that led from the guest wing to the main living area was dimly lit. I could hear voices more clearly now. Alejandro's calm, controlled voice and another one, older, smoother. You've been avoiding me, Alessandro. That's not like you at all. I've been busy, Roberto. Just handling some personal matters. Personal matters that involve hiding schoolteachers in your penthouse? Is that the kind of personal we're talking about? My blood went cold. He knew everything. Of course, he knew. I moved closer, sticking to the shadows, until I could peek into the living room. Roberto Luminari was standing near the windows, his hands clasped behind his back like some kind of professor giving a lecture. He was nothing like I had imagined. Silver hair, perfectly styled. An expensive suit, wire-rimmed glasses that gave him this intellectual air. He looked like he could be anyone's grandfather, not a man who had murdered children. 6 men were standing behind him in a loose half-circle. They all looked like stone-cold professionals, their hands near concealed weapons, their eyes constantly scanning the room. Alejandro's guards were strategically positioned around the room. I could see at least 8 of them, and there were probably more hidden somewhere. The tension in the air was about to explode. "I have no idea what you're talking about," Alessandro said evenly. "Don't insult my intelligence. You made a woman disappear from her apartment 6 days ago. Emma Reeves, 25, a substitute teacher. The same woman you seemed unusually interested in at that fundraiser." Roberto turned away from the window, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Care to tell me why you're so fascinated with a nobody schoolteacher?" "That's my business, Roberto. Everything you do is family business. You're not just Alessandro Fontanilli anymore. You're the boss. Your actions have an impact on all of us." Roberto took a step closer. He wasn't threatening, but he was deliberate. "So, I'll ask you again, Alessandro. Why are you hiding her? What is it that she has that's worth risking the family's stability?" "That is absolutely nothing that concerns you. But it does concern me because I've done a little digging on Ms. Reeves. She has a very interesting background, Roberto. Born in Brooklyn, adopted at a young age. Lived in Brooklyn Heights until August of 2010. Then her whole family just bolted to Boston within 2 weeks. No job transfer, no explanation given. They just packed up and ran. August of 2010. That was the same month that sweet little Bianca died. Same neighborhood, too. What a remarkable coincidence. Don't you think?" Alejandro's expression didn't change a bit, but his hand inched slightly towards his weapon. All the guards tensed up at the same time. "You need to be careful about throwing around accusations, Roberto. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm simply pointing out a few interesting patterns." "Okay, here's the translation and rewritten version of the provided text, adhering to all given constraints and instructions. So what happens next? The council meets tomorrow at 1 hour 13 minutes and 43 seconds. They'll hear everything, review all the evidence, and then make their decision. Regardless of how they rule, Roberto's entire network will be dismantled. Without him to give orders, his people will be lost. They won't know what to do. You'll be able to safely resume your life." He paused for a moment there. "If that's actually what you want, that is. What else could I possibly want? You could stay here with me." The words just hung there between us, loaded with a meaning that I honestly wasn't ready to unpack or deal with. Not as some kind of prisoner, though, but as someone who chooses to actually be here with me of their own free will. I just stared at him then, really trying to understand exactly what it was that he was offering me. "Alessandro, I'm just a substitute teacher from Brooklyn, for crying out loud. And you? You're a mafia boss who just straight up executed his underboss. What kind of life could we possibly even have together? An honest one, Emma. A life where you know absolutely everything about who and what I am, and you choose me anyway, knowing all of that." He moved even closer to me then and gently cupped my face in his hands. "Emma, I know that this is completely insane. I know that I have absolutely no right to even ask this of you after everything you've witnessed firsthand. But these past few days that I've spent with you, they've been the first time since Bianca died that I've genuinely felt something other than just pure, unadulterated anger and emptiness. You barely even know me. I know that you kept a promise that you made to a dying child for a staggering 15 years. I know that you're brave enough to face trauma head-on instead of just running away from it as fast as you can. I know that just being near you makes me feel human again, in a way that I'd honestly forgotten was even possible." His thumb then traced along my cheekbone, so softly. "I know that I'm falling in love with you, Emma, and that honestly terrifies me more than any war or council vote ever could." That confession honestly made my breath just catch in my throat. Part of me just desperately wanted to lean into those words, to truly believe that we could somehow make this absolutely insane situation work. But reality is often so harsh and unforgiving. "I just can't," I whispered to him. "I just can't be with someone who solves their problems with violence, someone who can just kill people without even a second thought. That's just not who I am as a person." I could see the pain flicker across his eyes, but he just nodded slowly. "I understand," he said. "After the council votes tomorrow, I'll have Vincent take you home. You'll have security stationed discreetly nearby for a few weeks, just to ensure that there aren't any residual threats lingering out there. And after that, you're free to live your life however you want to. And what about you? I'll just go back to being Alessandro Fontanilli, the boss of a criminal empire, living a life that you clearly want absolutely no part of. He just let his hands drop then. But I'll never forget that you were there with my sister when she died. That you gave her comfort in her very last moments. That truly matters, Emma. Even if nothing else ever does between us. He turned to leave then, but I just reached out and caught his wrist. Alessandro, wait, please. I need you to know something, I said to him. These feelings, whatever this is between us, it's not one-sided, you know. When you touch me, when you look at me like I actually matter as a person, I feel something that I truly haven't felt since my parents died. Like I'm just not alone in the world anymore. Then why are you pushing me away like this? Because I'm absolutely terrified, Alessandro. Terrified of your entire world, of all the violence, of losing myself completely in something that I just can't control. I watched my parents live in constant fear for 15 years because of one single night. I just can't do that to myself. I just can't choose a life where danger is always constant and death is always just one bad decision away. Alessandro then pulled me into his arms, holding me so incredibly tight against his chest. I could actually hear his heart beating, strong and steady, despite absolutely everything. I really wish I could promise you safety. I wish I could somehow be someone other than who and what I am. But I just can't lie to you, Emma. Not after everything that we've been through. My world is dangerous. It always will be. And anyone who is close to me lives with that reality hanging over them. I know that all too well, I said. I then pulled back just enough to look up at him. That's honestly why I have to leave. Not because I don't care about you at all, but because I care far too much to watch you just become even more of what ultimately killed Bianca. You think I'll end up just like Roberto? I honestly think that violence just breeds more violence. I think that the more you kill, the easier it just becomes to do it. I think that eventually you'll just stop seeing people as actual human beings and start only seeing them as obstacles or threats that need to be dealt with. I then gently touched his face with my hand. And I honestly think that you deserve so much better than that. Better than just becoming the very thing that you hate the most. He kissed me then, so fierce and desperate, almost like he was trying to memorize the very taste of me before I just disappeared completely. And I kissed him back with just as much intensity, pouring 15 years of loneliness and fear and desperate need for some kind of genuine connection into that one single kiss. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. If circumstances were even just a little bit different, he said roughly. If I was just anyone else, would you stay with me? If circumstances were different, we never would have even met in the first place. Bianca would still be alive right now, and you'd be living whatever life that she would have wanted for you. I then managed a sad smile. I'm honestly glad that I met you, Alessandro. I'm glad that I could finally tell someone the truth about what actually happened that night. But we were honestly never meant to be anything more than this. Just two people who were brought together by a terrible tragedy. Both just trying to find some kind of justice for a little girl who so clearly deserved so much better than what she got. She truly did deserve better, he said softly. So do you. He then stepped back, putting some much-needed distance between us. The council meets at noon tomorrow. Luca will bring you my final decision after that. Whatever they decide, you'll be free by tomorrow night. What if they rule against you? What if you end up being in danger because of it? Then I'll just handle it the way that I handle everything else, with violence and strategy and whatever else it takes for me to just survive. His expression then hardened, just snapping right back into that cold mask that I recognized so well from our very first meeting. But you really don't need to worry about any of that, he assured me. By tomorrow night, you'll be back in your apartment, and back to your old life. This whole thing will just be a strange 2 weeks that you'll eventually just convince yourself was some kind of fever dream. Will you be okay after I leave? I've honestly been alone since Bianca died, Emma. So, another decade or two really won't make much of a difference to me. He then moved towards his office, but then paused in the doorway. Emma, thank you for keeping her promise, for surviving all of this, and for finally giving me some kind of closure that I honestly thought that I'd never have. That truly means everything to me. And then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a quiet finality. I just stood there in the kitchen of his ridiculously expensive penthouse, my coffee just going cold in my hands, and just wondering how I had managed to fall for someone whose world I just couldn't possibly inhabit. Tomorrow the council would vote. Tomorrow I'd finally be free. Tomorrow I could just go back to teaching art to fourth graders and pretending that the past 2 weeks hadn't even happened. So, why did that supposed freedom feel like the absolute worst kind of prison? Vincent drove me back to my apartment 2 weeks after I had left it. 2 weeks that honestly felt like a lifetime. Alessandro hadn't even said goodbye. He'd already been gone when Vincent knocked on the guest room door that morning, already at the council meeting that would ultimately determine his fate. Luca had delivered the news to me just an hour later. The council had ultimately ruled in Alessandro's favor. Roberto's betrayal had been fully confirmed through overwhelming evidence that they just couldn't ignore. My testimony, combined with Antonio Fontanilli's documents and Roberto's own recorded confession, just left absolutely no room for doubt whatsoever. Alessandro's execution of him was deemed completely justified. His position was now secure and I was finally free to go. My apartment looked exactly as I had left it. Student artwork still hanging on the walls. Art supplies scattered all over my desk. Coffee mug still sitting in the sink from that last morning before absolutely everything had changed. It was almost like the entire world had just frozen in place while I had been gone. "We'll have someone posted nearby for the next few weeks," Vincent said to me as he set my bag down inside. "You won't actually see them, but they'll definitely be watching. Just in case any of Roberto's people suddenly get any ideas." "Thank you," I said. "The boss wanted me to give you this." He then handed me a brand new phone, clean and untouched. "Your old one was compromised. This one is completely secure. His number's already programmed in, just in case you ever need absolutely anything at all." After Vincent had left, I just stood there in the center of my tiny studio apartment and tried to feel relieved. I was finally home. I was safe. Roberto was now dead. His entire network had been completely dismantled. The threat was finally gone. I could just go back to teaching, go back to my ordinary life. So, why did absolutely everything suddenly feel so hollow and empty? I returned to work the very next day. Principal Morrison welcomed me back with so much sympathy about my supposed family emergency. My students had all made me welcome back cards. Their messy handwriting and enthusiastic crayon drawings were exactly the kind of pure joy that I really needed at that moment. For a full 8 hours, I pretended that absolutely everything was completely normal. But then at night, completely alone in my apartment, I just couldn't stop thinking about Alessandro, just wondering if he was even okay. If the council's ruling had really resolved absolutely everything, if he was even sleeping, or if he was just lying awake just like me, replaying all of those last conversations over and over again in his head. 3 days passed and then a full week. My new phone just stayed completely silent. The number that Vincent had programmed into it remained completely untouched. Alessandro had truly meant what he had said. He'd finally let me go, finally given me the freedom that I had actually asked for. I really should have been grateful for that. Instead, I just felt like I had lost something completely irreplaceable. On the 8th day, I finally made a decision, probably a stupid one, and definitely a very dangerous one. But I just couldn't keep on living with this constant weight on my shoulders, this nagging sense of unfinished business between us. I finally called the number that Vincent had saved for me. It rang just twice before Alessandro finally answered. "Emma," he said, just my name, but the way that he said it made my breath catch immediately, like he had just been waiting for this very call, almost even hoping for it despite absolutely everything. "I need to ask you something," I said, "and I need you to be completely honest with me, Alessandro." "Always," he said. "Are you okay? Really okay? The council ruling, your position, all of it." There was silence for a long moment. Then he finally said, "The council restored my full confidence in me. Roberto's remaining loyalists have either fallen in line or they have been completely removed from their positions. The Russians have accepted our explanation about the 15-year-old misunderstanding. We're currently negotiating reparations and new territorial agreements. Everything is now stable." "That is not what I asked you, Alessandro," I said to him. I know, he said softly. His voice then roughened just a bit. I'm functional, Emma. I'm leading the family, making all the decisions that need to be made, handling all of the business. But am I truly okay? No, I really haven't been okay since Bianca died. And letting you just walk away like that really didn't help at all. You didn't actually let me walk away, Alessandro. I chose to leave because I just couldn't give you what you truly needed in your life. Safety, normalcy, a life that was completely free from violence. You were actually right to go, Emma. What if I was wrong, Alessandro? The words just came spilling out before I could even stop them. What if leaving was honestly the coward's choice? What if I just ran away because I was honestly scared of just how much I was actually feeling for you instead of being scared of who you actually are as a person? Emma, please don't do this to yourself. You made the absolute right call for yourself. Did I really? Because I've now spent the entire last week teaching art to 9-year-olds and honestly just feeling like I'm just sleepwalking through someone else's life completely. Everything that truly mattered to me, everything that actually felt real and authentic to me happened in those 2 weeks that I spent with you. And I just threw it all away because I was completely terrified. You were terrified for a very good reason, Emma. My world almost got you killed. Your world also made me feel truly alive for the very first time since my parents died. It made me feel like I actually mattered in this world. Like my survival for the past 15 years had finally actually meant something. I then paced my small apartment back and forth. My phone was pressed tightly to my ear. Alessandro, I honestly need to know something from you. When you said that you were falling in love with me, did you actually mean it? Or was it honestly just the intensity of everything that had happened between us? I truly meant it, Emma. I still mean it to this day. Past tense really doesn't apply here when the actual feeling hasn't changed at all. He paused for a moment. But that honestly doesn't mean that we should actually act on it. You truly deserve so much better than a life that's spent just constantly wondering if I'll even come home at the end of the day, or if you'll just get a call that I've been killed. You deserve actual peace in your life. What if I really don't want peace, Alessandro? What if I actually want something real and authentic? Even if it's truly dangerous, Emma, I really want to see you again, but not at your penthouse. And definitely not with guards posted everywhere. Somewhere completely neutral between us. Can you actually do that for me? When do you want to meet? Tonight, he said. There's a cemetery out in Brooklyn, Greenwood Cemetery. Meet me at the main entrance there at 8 p.m. tonight. Why a cemetery of all places? Because I really need to take you somewhere. I need to show you something that's very important to me. And then we can both finally decide if this is really over between us, or if we're honestly just giving up on something that could actually matter a great deal to both of us. He agreed with my suggestion. I then spent the rest of the entire day second-guessing myself. But by 7:30 p.m., I was already in a car and heading towards Greenwood Cemetery. The grounds were officially closed for the night, but Alessandro obviously had connections that could open absolutely anything that he needed opened. He was already waiting for me when I arrived, just standing beside a sleek black car, wearing jeans and a dark jacket instead of his usual expensive suits. He honestly looked younger, more like the 25-year-old man that he actually was instead of the hardened mafia boss that he had been forced to become. Where are we actually going? He asked me as I approached him slowly. Just follow me, I said to him. I had actually done quite a bit of research during the week that I had been gone. I had found records, I had made some calls, and I had discovered some information that I honestly hadn't even known about when I was just 10 years old. I then led Alessandro through all the winding cemetery paths until we finally reached a section with newer headstones. There, 2 markers sat right next to each other. Bianca Marie Fontanilli, born March 15, 2000, died August 1, 2010. Beloved daughter and sister. Franco Giovanni Sassolini, born June 8, 1960. Died August 1, 2010. Loyal friend and protector. Alessandro stopped dead in his tracks, just staring at the stones almost like he couldn't quite believe that they were actually real. I honestly didn't even know that they were buried together like this. Your mother arranged for it, Alessandro. I found the records myself. She wanted Bianca to be laid to rest right beside the man who had tried so desperately to save her life. I then moved even closer to him. I've honestly never visited here before. I just could never bring myself to actually face it, but I truly needed to come here with you tonight. I needed to finally tell her that her promise actually worked, that I survived everything, and that I ultimately helped you to find out the truth about what had actually happened that night. Alessandro then knelt down right between the two graves, placing one hand on each stone. Bianca, I'm just so sorry that it took me 15 long years to figure everything out. I'm so sorry that I didn't figure it all out sooner. I'm so sorry that Roberto managed to get away with what he did for so long. His voice then broke with emotion. But I finally got him, Bianca. He's now gone for good. And Franco has been avenged as well, finally. You're both finally at peace, he said softly. I then knelt down beside him. I then pulled the anchor necklace from out under my shirt. I had worn it every single day for the past 15 years. But I knew that it was now finally time for me to actually let it go. She gave me this in her final moments, Alessandro. She made me promise that I would hide it, to never tell anyone what I had seen, and to just survive. And I kept that promise to her. Bianca, I survived, I whispered. And because I actually did survive, Alessandro was finally able to find out the truth about everything. Your death wasn't meaningless at all. It wasn't ever forgotten. I then unclasped the necklace and placed it right at the base of Bianca's headstone. The anchor pendant caught the fading sunlight then, gleaming silver against the dark granite. Thank you, I whispered to her. Thank you for actually trusting me with your secret. Thank you for that final gift that you gave to me. I truly hope that wherever you are right now, you know that you actually made a huge difference in this world. Alessandro then pulled me against him, burying his face deeply into my hair. We just stayed like that for a long time, just kneeling there between those two graves, both mourning the people that we had both lost in such very different ways. Finally, he pulled back just enough to actually look at me. Why did you actually bring me here tonight, Emma? Because I truly needed you to see that I'm honestly not running away from your past anymore. I'm not scared of the little girl who died that night, or the immense weight of what I witnessed that night. I've carried her with me for the past 15 years, Alessandro. And if I'm actually with you, then I'll keep on carrying her with me. But I just won't be alone in it anymore, Alessandro. Emma, I still truly can't promise you safety. I'm honestly not asking you to promise me safety, Alessandro. I'm asking you to promise me honesty, to promise me a real relationship where I actually know exactly who you are as a person and exactly what your life actually involves. A relationship where I can still maintain my own identity, my own life, but still build something meaningful with you anyway. I then took both of his hands into mine. I honestly want to keep teaching, Alessandro. I honestly want my own apartment to retreat to whenever everything just gets to be far too intense for me to handle. I want to have clear boundaries between us, and the actual ability to walk away from everything if things just become absolutely unbearable for me. But I also honestly want you, Alessandro. I want whatever this connection is that we have between us. So, you're actually asking for a partnership and not some kind of fairy tale, then? Fairy tales are really only for people who don't actually understand that real life is always complicated and messy and oftentimes absolutely terrifying. I honestly understand exactly what being with you actually means, and I'm actually choosing it anyway. I then met his ice blue eyes with my own. Are you actually choosing me back, Alessandro? He kissed me then, so gentle and fierce all at the exact same time. When we finally broke apart again, he rested his forehead right against mine. I choose you every single day with every single decision that I make, for as long as you'll actually have me in your life. But if it ever gets to be far too dangerous for you, or if you ever just change your mind about all of this, or if you ever truly need to leave me, then I honestly won't stop you from leaving. Your safety honestly matters far more to me than my own happiness ever could. Deal, I said. But you honestly don't get to make any decisions for me about what you think is far too dangerous for me. I'm a grown adult woman who has survived some intense trauma before in my life. I can absolutely make my own choices. You're just a stubborn woman, Emma. You honestly have absolutely no idea just how stubborn I actually am, Alessandro. We stayed at the cemetery until the sun had completely finished setting that night. We were just talking about logistics and setting boundaries and what a relationship between a hardened mafia boss and a substitute art teacher could actually look like. It definitely wouldn't be easy for us. And it definitely wouldn't be safe for me either. But it would absolutely be real. 6 months later, I was standing right in front of a classroom teaching fourth graders all about color theory, while Alessandro was off handling whatever business he needed to handle. Business that I deliberately didn't ask him anything about. Most nights I went back to my own apartment out in Park Slope. And some nights I went back to his penthouse out in Manhattan. We had finally found a rhythm that worked well for both of us. A good balance between his world and my own. And then once a month we would visit Greenwood Cemetery together, brought some fresh flowers and told Bianca stories about our lives, and then thanked her for the promise that had ultimately brought us together in the first place. She had just asked me to simply survive 15 years ago, and I had done honestly so much more than that. I had truly lived my life to the fullest, and I had finally found someone who truly understood that surviving and actually living really weren't always the exact same thing. But they were both definitely worth fighting for in this world. The anchor necklace remained there at her grave, finally returned to its rightful owner. But the actual promise itself remained with me, always woven into absolutely everything that I had become as a person. Some people are truly brought together by chance, and others are brought together by tragedy. Alessandro and I were ultimately brought together by a 10-year-old girl's final wish, a 15-year-old secret, and the desperate human need to believe that even in the darkest of times, justice and love could somehow still survive in this world.